Athens village and vicinity. Now, to begin with, I was born the 9th of 10 children of Nelson and Mary Jane Inman. I was actually born March 15th, 1895 in Howardsville. And Howardsville is about 25 miles to the west of us here, actually in St. Joe County. And I lived there for about 2 years with a family, and then we moved to the Fulton area. Now, my dad was a hunter and a trapper, and he hunted and trapped the Nottawa, Pine Creek, Athens Creek when the water levels were high enough, and he did pretty well for himself. He was able to, provide for his family, and then, as a matter of fact, he bought his first piece of property with 75 skunk pelts, and he caught them all in 1 year. Well, while we were living there, we belonged to the Fulton Reformed Church. And when I was a teenager then, we moved to the Athens area, and not in the village, but as a matter of fact, right down Burr Oak Road here. Now, if you're familiar with the area, there's a jog down there, and we lived just around the jog, and in the road, actually, practically Burr Oak Road would go right into the drive if you weren't careful. So anyway, that's where we lived, and our family grew up here. My brothers were farmers. I had one brother that had a farm on 1 Mile Road, and then between here and 1 Mile, 2 brothers had farms there. And then one brother had a farm in the Fulton area. Well, as I said, my family stayed in the area. My 4 sisters then married locally and raised their families here. And it's when we lived on Burr Oak Road is when I went into the service. So actually November 23rd, just before Thanksgiving, 1917, I went into the service, and I went immediately to Camp Custer for my basic training. And I did fine. I was doing all the basic stuff, the combat skills and so on, and was doing great until January of 1918. And unfortunately, I came down with the measles, and severe enough that I ended up going into the camp hospital, and I got continually worse and continually worse, but I rebounded, came back, and went back to regular duty. But then, in February, then I had a relapse and went back into the camp hospital. And this time, I didn't rebound. And I, deteriorated and deteriorated until it was such that through the complications of the measles, I ended up having a heart attack. And so on Saturday, February 16th, at the camp hospital, 6:30 p.m., I went to be with my Lord. And that would be 1 month and 1 day before my 23rd birthday. And that earned me the wonderful distinction of being the first young man from Athens to have died while in the service in World War I. Well then, on Tuesday of the following week, that'd be February 19th, my body was taken by the W. Farley Funeral Home from Camp Custer and delivered to the Shed and Hoffman furniture dealer and undertaker services in Athens. And at the same time then, about the same time, there had been a request made to the Camp Custer officials for either an honor guard or military funeral. And then also my funeral was planned for the afternoon of the 20th, February, that'd be Wednesday, February 20th at the Fulton Reformed Church. And at that time, Pastor Eisenberg was the pastor there, and he would officiate. Well, the request at Camp Custer was approved. And so on a very cold, dark, and wintry morning, 18 young men boarded a big Liberty truck. Now those were great big Army trucks, rated at from 3 to 6 ton. And they were to make their way to Fulton. The group was headed by Lieutenant David Blank, and then he was accompanied by Chaplain Lieutenant Jorgen Inger, and then there was a bugler whose name I don't know. And then the other 15 boys were from Company B. And they all boarded that truck, and the bed had a canvas, arch top, and then there was a canvas over the cab. And then they started on their way to Fulton. Well, they didn't get far, but they got stuck in a snowbank right away. And they got out, pushed, shoved, did everything they had to do to move that truck, which they did. And then only to get stuck again and again. So between, on the road that they came down was from the Augusta to Climax Road, and then from Climax down to Fulton. Well, they got stuck 3 times, and they were delayed then getting to the church. But nonetheless, everything worked out. They had a dual service. The Chaplain Inger and Pastor Eisenberg conducted the service in the Fulton Reformed Church. And while the service was going, all the stores in Athens and in Fulton were closed. So then, from the Fulton Reformed Church, they proceeded up here to the Burr Oak Cemetery. And so 95 years ago, they came in, the funeral coach, the big Liberty truck, and my family and friends and their vehicles came in the same gate you did when you came in tonight. They would have come in this west drive, driven right over here. Can you see those 2 tiki lights behind me over here? On that west drive, that's where they would have stopped. And then 6 of the boys from Company B carried my casket from the funeral coach over to the burial frame right where those 2 torches are. I would be the first boy, the first member of our family to be buried on that plot. And it wouldn't be until 25 years later when anybody else was buried there. Well, then Chaplain Inger and Pastor Eisenberg offered final prayers. And then the bugler stood off to the side in the cold, stood and played taps. And that would be the final honor that would be paid by the U.S. Army to its dead. Then the 2 of the boys came over and picked up the flag that draped my coffin and folded it, and then Lieutenant Blank then presented that to my mom. And that would be the first military funeral conducted in this cemetery. And then from there, everybody went down to the Masonic temple for a grand meal. And the people from the village prepared the meal, and the ladies from the temple served the meal. And it was described as being a bountiful supper and smoker. And then during the dinner, then Lieutenant Plank made some remarks, and he talked very highly of my abilities and of my conduct. Then the other thing he added was that this was a fitting send-off for 15 of the boys, because 15 were going to be shipped to France the following week. So that was a nice, very nice thing, and they really enjoyed the meal. And then on their way out, somebody mentioned it's going to be a really cold ride, you know, going back to Camp Custer. But we would travel with warm hearts. Now, what I want to add a couple of things here. One is I want to point out this easel, and there's 2 pictures of me, one with my sister Harriet, and then one lone picture over here on the other side. There's two pictures of the big Liberty trucks, and then there's a picture of the camp hospital, and that was prepared by my grandnephew Jerry Inman and his wife Carlene. Now, on the trucks, those trucks were, as I said, heavy-duty trucks, but they only had like 52 horsepower. Top speed was 15 miles an hour, and they were designed by the Army Motor Transport section of the Quartermaster Corps. They were manufactured by 15 different manufacturers in Michigan, mostly in Detroit. Now, one of the manufacturers was Studebaker, Nash, Republic, and I think Rio. I don't know the names of the rest, but all of them were made in Michigan. Now, about the boys in the service, I went in November 1917, and I wasn't the first. 4 of the boys went in the first part of June 1917, from Athens now I'm talking about, and they were inducted in Marshall and then reported to Camp Custer for their basic. Then at the end of June, there were 20 young men from Athens that were in the service, not all in the Army, but in the service. And by the end of the war, November of 1918, there were 83 young men from Athens who had been in the service in World War I, 3 of whom were from the Pine Creek Indian Reservation, and there was myself and 19 others that didn't come home alive. Many are buried here in this cemetery along with me. And that's the end of my story, and thank you very much for coming.